Now, let's be honest, who doesn't love predictions and trends for the year ahead? I sure do. And if I had to kick us off and to make a prediction for what 2022 is all about, I would say it's going to be the year of meta. Because meta actually means it's a prefix for beyond. And for me, that means beyond credentials, beyond just having a job, beyond just the real world. We are connecting real world and the digital world more and more. And also living now in this more connected and with that more competitive world of work, we cannot simply rely on having more credentials and more years of experience and more, you name it, then because there will always be somebody who is quicker and faster, more experienced, more educated than we are. And the only way how we can stand out is by building, monetizing, and also fostering, obviously, our strong person brand. And I couldn't be any more excited to be joined by who I would call the OJ of person branding. Phil Pallen is in the house. Phil, thanks so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. I so appreciate your kind intro and your kind words. I'm just as thrilled as you are to kick off this conversation.
Now, I've been following you for quite some time and I've seen your evolution. You have literally been in person branding since day dot, and you constantly come up with the latest trends. You educate us on content, how to actually also build partnerships, and you also live a remote lifestyle for quite some time. But to backtrack, how did you actually get into person branding?
Yeah, I mean, it is wild when I stop and think about how long I've done this. I remember when I started in personal branding, it was around 2011. I had just graduated with my master's degree in entertainment business. I moved out to LA. I wanted to work in entertainment in some way, shape, or form. I wasn't sure if I was meant to go work at an agency, marketing or advertising or something, obviously to get my foot in the door, my first job. It just so happened that I didn't get a job working for someone, and being a Canadian living in the US, recently graduated, not only did I need to find a way to pay my tuition back, my debt, but also remain in the country. So I actually, it was a weekend workshop out in LA. I did on TV hosting, which was something I was interested in. And it was actually my first job in Canada was as a TV host. And that first weekend in that workshop, I came out of that workshop not only with some skills for hosting, which I'm sure we can talk about that, but that has come in handy very much nowadays with content creation and sponsored content, those kinds of things. But that weekend, I came out with 3 new clients, all women, a real estate agent, a jewelry designer, and a makeup artist that all needed help figuring out, first of all, how to make a website, or if they needed a logo, these kinds of questions about building their brand on the internet, and then navigating social media. And those are my first 3 clients. And if you can believe it, that is what I've done ever since. I have never, as you said in the intro, my business has certainly evolved in many ways. It used to be that when I got to the US, that was like my dream. I wanted to live in the US. And now you have a very hard time keeping me there, traveling all over the world. So certainly I've evolved, but very much the focus of my work has remained constant, even as technology has evolved. It's really still the same concept, which is achieving consistency between who you are in real life and how that's portrayed online. And so, as a brand strategist, I help people create that first impression that they give others online, from positioning your brand, building something to show for it, and promoting it.
Oh, I love it. And I'm glad that you gave us the definition for what branding is all about, connecting the digital you and the real or offline you together. Because nowadays, most first interactions happen online. And you've been in that
Yeah,
game for way before that was a thing. And it was always kind of a nice to have your Instagram profile, to have your LinkedIn profile, to have your website. But nowadays, post-COVID, this is the one and only way how we actually get started with connecting with people, to searching for solutions in one way or the other. And you have
you're
evolved
right.
through that. So I'm really excited to dig into that in so many aspects. Now, when we talk about starting with a person brand, and especially, I'm not sure if that's the same where you are now currently in Mexico, we are talking about the great resignation. That's going to be a big thing, that more and more professionals are leaving corporate world. They want to start either their own business, they want to build a portfolio career, and also building multiple income streams, which I hope we can also talk a little bit further, but they have been in their one career, in this one industry, in this one company for quite some time. How would you get started with helping them identifying, defining, and then communicating their personal brand?
Sure. So The first thing that comes to mind is before we actually do anything, it's actually legitimizing, the need, the motivation, and the excitement around creating something that gives you complete control. For people that have lived in the corporate world for so long or have worked for someone else, even if it's a small business, and spend so much energy building someone else's dream. I mean, sure, it's given you maybe a safe safety net around a salary and maybe incremental promotions or raises, but there's nothing quite like having complete control over your ability to grow and earn. And most importantly, spend your time doing something that you really enjoy. Any entrepreneur that actually loves what they do, that resonates, because if you can wake up and chip away at your workday almost as if it was a hobby, not everything's going to feel like a hobby, but if you can chip away at that, it feels so good. And I feel that way about my work, and in part because I've had some say as to what my work is and how my business has unfolded. So the first thing I would say before we even begin, I think we have some rewiring to do up there. And my first thing would be to say to someone who's in that position, I'm giving you permission to spend time thinking about what it is you love to do. The successful formula for positioning your brand is really made up of two elements here. It's like a simple math formula where you just got to plug in the variables. Your brand, in terms of its positioning, really should be something you absolutely love to do, paired with something others need. And I don't want you to answer those, plug in those variables overnight. It's really something you should be sitting with. In now over 10 years of business, I have sat with that exact formula, and it has often prompted me to, yes, continue offering the same types of services that help my clients achieve the same challenges, or overcome them rather, but also to evolve and to be aware and to be humble around other opportunities that exist that fulfill you within your business. They really highlight or complement your competitive advantages. They make you fierce in the marketplace. But also they challenge you, they keep you engaged, they keep you excited and in the game. So I would say before we even start any work, which I'm sure we'll talk about, things to build your brand and what that process looks like, I would say you need someone like me or someone like you to come along and say, listen, we're giving you permission to sit with this new world or this new reality. Take some time to think about what it is you love to do, paired with something others need and ideally are willing to spend money on.
This is the perfect definition, because you also connected personal branding equals control. And this is exactly what happens, because you are very much in control what you put out there, how others perceive you, and how you can monetize that. And so many are just floating through life and they're getting one job after the next, mainly because of others or because of introductions. But nowadays, nothing is safe anymore. Companies are restructuring, hierarchy is getting flatter. And at the same time, I think COVID-19 was also a shakeup for so many that they actually don't enjoy doing what they're doing anymore, or their skill set has become irrelevant and they are not in control at all anymore over their level of success. So 100%. Give yourself the permission also to unlearn, because the traditional way how we progress in our career was you get your degree, you work your way up, you get the senior role, retire, and you're out. But this is not the case anymore. So this is really exciting. Now, how did you find your sweet spot? How did you know that you wanted to get into that direction? Did you have any motivation? Did you see anyone else doing it? What was the trigger?
No, I didn't see anyone else doing it. It was still relatively new. This idea that you would create a business around yourself is not to say that that's new, because people have built businesses. We've been working as professionals, lawyers, doctors, etc. They've built businesses, but I think this idea of building this brand and then having it live online in some way that you have control over, or using the internet as a way to generate traffic for an in-person business or a business that's totally virtual, as you said earlier, or for years, pre-pandemic, I worked remotely. I lived in LA for a long time and I never have driven in that city ever, ever, ever. And so people find that crazy. Anyone who's been there knows it's like such a car city. I didn't drive. And so even for me, to like have in-person meetings and stuff was highly inefficient. So I've been working remote for a very long time. In fact, I love when my client is far enough away that I don't even have to see them in real life and they don't have to expect me to be inefficient, commuting to a meeting or something like that. And instead we work efficiently on a project, create something we're really proud of, and then cheers to that whenever we get to meet in real life. So no, it wasn't something that I had seen anyone do. It was me listening to the market going, where is there place for me? I thought, oh my gosh, I guess I should go do what everyone else, what is expected of them and go work at an agency. And then I realized actually there are smaller players, there are small businesses, there are solopreneurs that need help with a lot of these challenges. Why would I go and work, for a big team that's helping an automotive company launch an ad campaign, something like that? And there's all these people, like little ants running around. It's just, I've always worked in the trenches. Luckily, I had very practical skills so that even if a client needed something, and I didn't know how to do it, I would figure it out. And I'm very proud that even 10 years into business, the websites that we create for our clients, I still make them. People are like, really? That's crazy. You still do that? Yes, I still do them. That's built into my schedule. I code, I design. Of course, I'll sometimes have people on our team help me execute certain things. I've had the same designer that I've worked with for our brand identity projects now for over 7 years. I mean, our team is small and lean, but mighty and very loyal. And it's pretty fun. It's interesting how things have evolved, but also some things have stayed the same because technology will continue to evolve. But what we're trying to accomplish and achieve is really based on human chemistry, based on first impressions, these types of things. And I don't think that the human component of this will never change.
This is gold because in the end, everything is so fast paced these days and everyone is looking after the next big thing and the next trend and the next tool and whatever it might be. But it all comes down to how do we interact with each other and what does the human psyche actually is looking for. Just we are answering it with a different approach, but the strategy behind that will always be the same. And you've set so many trends, I find anyway, in terms of social media, in terms of content creation, in terms of running your own business and developing and monetizing your own intellectual property. And what you just said was also really fascinating. You listened to the market. What are your strategies and tactics to actually do it? How do you do the research?
Yeah, it's funny because I like don't want to repeat myself, but I think I might just to keep this simple. And this is the formula that I shared with you. Being aware of what it is you love to do. If you could do something. So not everyone can answer this question. What is your brand in one sentence? Because it might still be under construction, but I bet you'll know the answer to this question. If you won the lottery today, what is it you do with your time tomorrow? By the way, I want to know your answer. Yeah, I want to know your answer. I'm all of a sudden interviewing you in your own podcast.
Well, I've thought about that many, many times, and I would do exactly what I'm doing now. I love to teach. I love to get other people to get their message heard. I wouldn't change a thing. I would
kind of amazing position to be in, right? So that means that you've done some really important work around the positioning of your brand and your business. That's what it tells me. And of course, we can add fun things in there, like you'd travel lots and I would drink expensive champagne all the time. Well, maybe not all the time, but when the moment calls for it. And those are little things that you can sprinkle in. Maybe you make it your goal to work with a champagne company, or, I love like barber shop culture. And that's still on my vision board of like the type of business or brand that I'd love to create. These questions are really important. And so for me, I had the opportunity to sit with this and not necessarily know the answer, but be willing to explore what can get me there, not overnight, but how can I get started? all too often people hang out in this zone of like strategy and idea land, la la land. And I'm not a big fan of staying in there too long. It's fine to visit, but I'm really a big fan of hitting the ground and running. So even my service, I work with fairly high end or established professionals in their industry. I'm not the right person for everyone. Like for someone just getting started, I'm probably not the right person to hire. And that's a wonderful thing. I know my audience, and you know, I built that for many, many years. My first client was not that fancy or impressive. I think my first client was a wholesale candle company in Ohio. Wonderful people, but that, so being aware that like we don't have to reach our goals overnight, but that might be lap one of this marathon. It's often a marathon, not a sprint. So I would say it really, for me, it like came back to that formula of like, what is it I love to do? How can I enjoy the work I'm doing? But where do I fit in? Who are the types of people that are going to get a lot of value working for me? I think it's going to be people who appreciate the fact that I have tangible skills. I can hop into Photoshop. I can hop into pretty much any app, or even look at some basic lines of code, move some stuff around. Those skills really helped me, I think, in the early days of creating a business of one that eventually became a business of a little bit more. But that being said, unlike other like agency owners, I'm not really interested in growing a big business and then scaling it and selling it, because I don't know what else I would do. You probably feel the same way. I'm like very much into the lifestyle of my business to be able to do all the things I want to do, see all the places I want to see, and still be able to work and really enjoy the process of working.
And I think this is such an important piece to the success puzzle, because in the end, you need to know what success looks like for you. And for some, it might be working for those multi-million-dollar agencies. And for others, it's like having the freedom to sip margaritas at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or do whatever it might be. But we are still so much into that mindset. Well, I have to do the 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 or 8 to 8 daily schedule to be quote unquote successful. And I think now more and more that mindset is shifting, because we're seeing the next generation. They're not aspiring to work until they're dead in this one career. So this is really very refreshing to hear and see that you've been doing that for such a long time, and you also give permission to others to follow exactly the same steps.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes you just have to hear it from someone that gives you permission. And it's like, why do we need that? Just sometimes as humans, we need that little bit of permission.
Exactly. And also permission to say no. You said, I'm not for everyone. And this is also something that we have to learn, that in a second we put our personal brand out there, we attract the right people, but also repel others. We cannot please every single person. And this is also where we eventually burn out, if we're trying to please every single person and do our best. And for them, it's still not even good enough. We're not getting anywhere. So it shows a strong self-awareness, and you clearly have done your homework in this space also.
Well, I think, thank you. And also I've experimented with lots of things on my own brand. I'm very proud that, at the time of us recording this, I have over 70 projects on my website that showcase personal branding, a little bit of corporate work, but most of my clients are people in all different kinds of industries. And I'm very proud that I've had the ability to do that within my career, but also keep in mind, I've tested a lot of stuff on my own brand first. So before I make a recommendation to a client or a strategy, like I've tested it, I've tried it, I've seen what works and what doesn't work. I'm my own guinea pig. So I appreciate those kind words, but also for someone just getting started, don't be intimidated by, maybe what other people have in their portfolio or what they've achieved. A lot of times they've been at it a little bit longer. And the beautiful thing of the internet is that you can always be strongly inspired by what others are doing well. Sometimes what they're not doing well can inspire you, but everything's out there to consume. Remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint. I've been in it for 10 years, but a lot of people, even by this time, they would have changed it slightly. I have clients who have branded in a particular niche. They've come back and said, hey, we need to change my brand a little bit because I found that I'm working predominantly in this industry or with this type of client. And these are things they wouldn't have known until they started doing. This is why I'm a big believer in doing instead of spending time in idea land, la la land, thinking about what all the possibilities are. You have to hit the ground running, test, try, learn, tweak, adapt, and evolve.
Absolutely. Evolve is probably the big keyword, because in a couple of weeks interviews prior to this podcast, I interviewed Dr. Nadia Seksenbayeva, and she's called the Chief Reinvention Officer, and she does research on reinvention. And she's found out that even those high investment industries like mining, for example, have to reinvent every 5 to 7 years. And that obviously impacts their careers and the skill sets that are required for this evolution. And the same goes for your brand. This is also what makes it so successful, because you get started. Also, if it's 80% imperfectly done, it's still better than 100% perfectly planned and never sees the daylight, because in the second it sees the daylight, it's probably already outdated anyway. And give yourself permission to also experiment, saying, yeah, I thought it's amazing and now I've done it. Not so amazing what I thought about. And then it keeps us humble too, isn't it? Now,
I had myself muted. I was going to say, yes, absolutely.
Now, looking into the year ahead, 2022, as I said, I think the year is all about meta. And maybe, Facebook has set already the trend in there. It goes beyond the traditional way of thinking, beyond the traditional career titles, the traditional way of career progression. What do you think in terms of personal branding trends that we are going to see in 2022? What do we need to prepare for? What can we do now to future-proof ourselves?
Okay, that's a great question. I'd say I don't yet have all the answers, but what we're seeing a huge immediate trend are people's willingness to invest in intangible assets. Intangible assets. We're seeing this with NFTs. We're seeing a real level of mystery, sophistication, investment, I'd say, in digital properties, digital assets. So I'm not a huge futurist in that I'm like living 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. That's not how my brain works. I'm not quite like Gary Vee in that sense. I'm a little more rooted in the now, but I'm very interested in how much value people are associating with digital properties. Here's what I think is something we're going to see and how it's going to affect personal branding. I think I'm happy about this because this is really the direction I've been wanting to move really my entire career. We're wanting to see a real level of sophistication in personal branding, not just good design, but very thoughtful, intricate, thorough branding. I think gone are the days where like your brand can be a color or two and a font and a logo that you had someone design 4 or 5 years ago. It's going to look amateur and it's going to feel amateur. And I think we're going to get to the point where it's actually going to limit you. Fine if you're just getting started and you're getting your feet wet and you launch your website. Immediately after launching, I want you thinking, okay, what's next? What's next? It's kind of like showing up for school, that first day of school, and you're all dressed up for that first day. Well, you're constantly thinking, how can I improve? How can I get better? How can I get more comfortable? How can I reach the top in your class or in your industry? So I think really what we're going to see is this real level of sophistication, depth, thoroughness in a brand or a rebrand, not just as a company. We've certainly seen this in a big corporate level or big corporate function, a big corporate entity. We've seen, 30 to 50 pages plus of brand guidelines. I really think that we're maybe not that extreme, but I think we're going to see that same degree of thoughtfulness, thoroughness in the development of a personal brand. And that I find very exciting.
I couldn't agree more, because nowadays there's a lot more noise also. So just having something out there doesn't cut it anymore. So we need to really own our point of difference and invest in that a lot more. And I heard a term called phygital. So physical and digital emerging a lot more. And we want to have the same experience that we've got in real life also when we are online. And online means everything from your Instagram profile to a LinkedIn profile to a website, whatever it might be, because this is usually where we connect first. So that's exciting. Also, NFTs and the whole digital space is certainly something interesting that people are getting more and more comfortable with. Is there any other tip that you would give us in terms of starting? So when we talk about, yes, I want to leave corporate, I want to leave my business even, should I do it myself in terms of personal branding, or should I engage a professional like yourself straight away?
Good question. So we have to look at what the parameters are, which is a nice term for restrictions around what you're able to do, right? So I would say the two most popular parameters that people are working with is timeline and budget. And I think I think that has to lead the way. I think just getting started, I love to see people have a willingness to get in the trenches, get in the weeds, and just like figure it out, at least to have a minimum viable concept to rock with. Just because you launch a website with a one page, doesn't mean you can't build that out on your website platform of choice. I'd say it's kind of this like entrepreneurial balance between getting in the weeds and doing some stuff yourself, but also an awareness in the early days around the value of your own time, to know when it's important to delegate something and when you should be doing something yourself. And particularly if someone is not creative, they shouldn't be doing anything creative within their brand. I do not want someone designing a logo if they've never designed a logo before. That's not within your wheelhouse. That's like if I was going to go try and attempt to cut my own hair, there's a reason I go and trust someone else to execute that, someone with experience, someone that by hiring them is respectful of my own time, rather than spending a whole day or an afternoon trying to figure that out myself, then it end in tragedy. I can use that time towards something that I know is going to help me in this marathon, not a sprint, this marathon of a journey. So I think it's really just navigating those nuances of going, you know what? I don't know a lot about this, but I'd love to learn more. And I think by learning, it'll move me forward in business. Knowing when those are the right moments, and then knowing the other moments of, you know what, I'm really not artistic. I'm really not creative in that sense. So I need to find someone who can help me create a minimal or minimum viable concept, at least to launch. I also, people spend a lot of time navigating like who's your archetype or what's your archetype, or who describe your ideal client. I mean, that's all fine. I think those exercises are more important for someone who's been in the industry, I think, for a few years and really knows their audience and can drill down on that. I say take your business or your brand to market your product or service and sell one, sell two, sell three, and learn with humility what people are responding to, what questions they're asking, what concerns they have, what they're excited about. There's so much that we learn. Again, I sound like a broken record, but I love that these themes are coming up in our conversation because they're really important. There's so much you learn from doing instead of strategizing, that I tend to like when someone has taken their business as far as they can themselves, or they know their own parameters. And if investing in me is going to help them arrive at that finished product that they're really proud of quicker, and they can then freeze them up time to focus on getting their ideal clients and building the business and the sales and the infrastructure, fantastic. You've probably found this as well. A lot of my clients love to have, even if we're engaging in a capacity of branding, positioning, brand consulting, and website creation, photography, brand identity. A lot of times it's helpful to have someone who's in your court to just talk through some business decisions. The number of clients that will say to me, 10 minutes at the end of a call, hey, by the way, I was thinking of doing this. What do you think about that? Chances are it's come up in a decade of business for me, especially working with people, and I can weigh in on that. And those are things we can't navigate, right up front. When someone hires me, they're not coming at me with a list of like, here are 100 questions I need you to answer at some point in the next 4 months. But it's nice to have someone in your court. And sometimes it's those little afterthought almost conversations that turn out to be humongous in the grand scheme of things.
That's so true. And sometimes we just need also the reassurance that we are on the right track or a sounding board. Does it even make sense? Or is it just, does it make sense in my own head? And one important element
Yeah.
that you also mentioned is entrepreneurial thinking, because whether you run your business or not, we all need to think a lot more entrepreneurial because careers and jobs are coming and going. And the same with our the manager level, for example, they are coming and going. So we can't rely on them recognizing us and helping us to progress. And I'm a big fan of building a portfolio career that came in handy in 2020 when COVID-19 hit. And by then I had 6 income streams, and 2 of the biggest ones were gone overnight. And of course, I did feel sorry for myself. Let's be real. But I focused on the other 4. And now I actually have 11, which is, amazing. And I know you're also a big fan of building a portfolio career, multiple income streams. How did you get started, and where do you get your money from? What kind of income streams have you got now?
Oh, I love this question. This is one of my very favorite
Me
topics
too.
because so while COVID or the pandemic didn't drastically disrupt anything for me, very grateful for that. I think it's really just a matter of luck. It's not that I was doing something or wasn't doing something that the restaurant was or wasn't doing down the road. I think really what that did was shake us all up, affect some of us more than others, but remind us the importance of not relying on one hand to feed you. Now, I actually learned this lesson a few years ago when I had a corporate client. It was a food client. We were doing creative work for them, content creation for social media channels, started as one brand, became 2 other brands. Hey, Phil, can you have your team deliver another brand? And then next month, let's do 4 brands. And then the next, by the end of the year, we're doing 5, 6 of their brands, occupying 5, 6 client slots that would normally go to a personal branding client, something like that. And then boom, change of management, change of investors, etc. The contract was gone within a month. And I had an entire team. I had all kinds of expenses. My business was totally built around serving that client, and it was gone. So I learned the lesson pre-COVID, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And I'm grateful for that experience. While it was tough to live it, like every business owner has to deal with, some of these tougher experiences, they teach you, and we become grateful for those moments when we look back on them. So for me, COVID made me realize the volatility or this false sense of security that we often have because we just get used to the way things are until they, can change in an instant. So I use the time that I would normally spend on airplanes and traveling, sometimes flying to conferences for speaking engagements, etc. I use that time to create courses. And that was a really fun experiment for me. I did well with the launch because I'd been building an audience for a few years that I'm very proud to have you a part of. I love when people keep an eye on what it is I'm doing and get excited. This is a topic that I'm passionate about because you've heard me talk about it. That's really cool. Courses led to the launch of a program. Now we do over 100,000 a year just in a group coaching model that was born from my courses. That was a COVID or a pandemic experiment for me. And what else has that spawned? I started to dabble in real estate a few years ago. That's now expanded. Just this year, let me give you an even more recent example. I haven't actually counted my income streams, but I should. I like that yours are 11. Mine are, I don't know if they're quite that high, but it's around that because I like to do lots of little things. I group a few income streams into one category. So affiliates, speaking engagements, and sponsored content. Speaking engagements and sponsored content are actually fairly similar. I just love sponsored content because I can do it from the comfort of home and on my own schedule and work with brands. And in January, that category was around $300 a month. Affiliates, speaking engagements, and sponsored content was around $300. So very minimal. Had I had one speaking engagement come in, that would be more significant for that month. But I can tell you now when I look at that spreadsheet, it fluctuates between 7,000 to 10,000 a month. And
Wow.
that's all from focusing, getting serious about it, creating content consistently. For me, it's YouTube that drives most of that more than Instagram. I'm a big fan of YouTube. I'm a big fan of TikTok. While I'm not posting consistently on TikTok, it's very good for distribution. If you can strike the right content and hit the algorithm. Pinterest is also awesome. LinkedIn, I know, is a passion of yours. You do so well on LinkedIn. I love seeing your posts and the way that you engage. You're very smart and very strategic. In fact, you're like the first person that comes to mind when I think about smart LinkedIn strategy. Even the way you promoted appearing on our podcast, by the way, episode 148 of Brand Therapy. We, for the record, I'm not making this up, recorded our year-end episode about a week ago. Your episode was one of our favorites of the year because it like rocked our world. It was not only the podcast episode, but the way you promoted it was just so awesome. So there, I know I like crammed a lot into that answer, but I didn't want to
Give me
forget
more,
those
give me
things.
more.
Yeah, right. I didn't want to forget those things. But that's, when we talk about income streams, it took me a year. It doesn't mean that it should take you a year, but when you start thinking about this and you start accepting the fact that one thing could go wrong or something could shut off that faucet, what do you have in place? Even if it's not huge to start, it won't be huge to start. YouTube for me started as a major expense. Now it's become an income stream. This year, I've done almost $50,000 in sponsor content deals, and it is my job. It is my job, and I love it. I've got a branding agency, and I plug into projects as and when I'm needed. But I told you at the beginning of this that my first job was a TV host. I trained in media. This is what I love to do, and now I'm doing it all because I've created it.
Absolutely. And you made such an important point to say not putting all your eggs in one basket to start with. And thanks so much for sharing and the reminder that it can go amazingly well one day and something changes next day. It could be the next pandemic. It could be a technology. It could be a bad boss who hates you. We don't know. It's not in our control. In our control is what we in terms of building an audience, building a network, creating content, upskilling in different ways and shapes and forms. And this is probably also to wrap our conversation up, because you are such an incredible content creator and community builder. Can you give us 1 or 2 tips on how we can get started? Where do you find inspiration for your content? How do you start with this caption when we look at the blank screen? It's like, I'm posting. No, I'm not posting today. Tomorrow it is. How can we get over this hurdle?
Yeah, great question. So many people chalk this up to like not having enough time to create content, which I think is just a big fat excuse. I think if it's taking you too long, then you're not being strategic enough in your approach. You're having conversations like this every single day, whether it's a podcast interview or a client call. There's no reason you can't hit record on a free app that will listen to you, even if it's just your answers on that call, that could then transcribe that and make that visual. You could pick through that and start an Instagram caption with something that you said on a client call. There's so many ways of creating content efficiently nowadays that I think time is not a valid excuse anymore for not doing it enough. I'd say it's more important to be consistent than to post every day for a month and then go silent for a month. We all have our own challenges. Things get in the way. That's just the reality of it. But I think the people that can be disciplined enough to post consistently, be it 3 times a week, for however long they're able to keep that up, or if it's every day, etc. That's key. I'd say those are my tips. Don't use time as an excuse. I'd say give yourself permission in the first little while that you're going to get going to spend the time, because it might take some time to learn the ropes. But once you've got system, you've got templates in your whatever you're using to create your graphics, etc., then it can actually take not a lot of time.
Absolutely. It comes down to systems and processes that you can sustain, that you also enjoy doing, because otherwise you're giving up after a week, and it's all coming down to the consistency and continuity. Such a hard word to say. Now, speaking of consistency and continuity, what are you going to continue in 2022? What's ahead for Phil Pallen?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I would say I will continue to service amazing clients from all different industries, professional speakers, consultants, coaches, media and entertainment personalities, all the different kinds of people that I get to meet and I get to help launch businesses. It's just so special. What you will definitely see me continuing to do is work with brands that I'm really proud to have ambassadorships with or partnerships with, to name a few. Adobe is one that I'll continue into 2022. An amazing app called AnyWord. I'm very proud to work with them on content for their YouTube and their explainer videos. I just love partnering with brands and explaining really cool technology to people and recommending apps and tools. I just love doing that. And that's, I think you'll see me do more, continue to do more sponsored content. I'd love to use my channels to reach more people en masse and help them. So I'm hoping to launch in 2022 my signature program that will be completely free called Self Start. And it's designed to help someone that's a self-starter work through all of the steps to build their own brands themselves without having to pay for it. There's going to be add-ons and upsells and those kinds of things for the people that want to do it even more efficiently or with a little bit of help from me. But that's my goal, is to really create and be able to build an audience in mass. Those are some of the things I'm thinking about and working on.
Oh, incredible. I'm very excited and I support everything that you do, because you always, whatever you put out there is extremely high quality content and quality. So
Thank you.
I definitely put all the links in the show notes. And where is the best way to connect with you? What's your favorite platform? Where should we find you?
Oh, I'm everywhere. I show up
I
everywhere.
know.
Probably the best place to start is philpallen.co. Philpallen.co/freebies. We're really proud of what we have for people to download for free. Just hand over your email address, and I have some of these amazing single sheets, ebooks, worksheets. I have an ebook called 100 Evergreen Content Ideas that's been downloaded over 6,000 times this year. Crazy, I know.
Crazy.
So philpallen.co/freebies has some really, really good free downloadable worksheets and stuff that'll help you build your brand. We also have a podcast, Brand Therapy. You've been on our podcast. You're one of our highlight episodes. I feel like people should go check that out. On Instagram, I spend a lot of time at Phil Pallen. If you spent the time to listen to this, I'd love to hear from you.
Incredible. I'm really looking forward to getting people's feedback, because I know this episode is going to skyrocket very quickly. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom and for your time.
I always love having conversations with you, and I so appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much.